While these animals show signs of being able to forecast natural disasters, others are unable to escape from danger. They live in a world where extreme weather events are part of their lives. The island of Puerto Rico lies in the Caribbean Sea, 1,000 miles off the coast of the United States. It's an area of immense natural beauty with its mountains, waterfalls and forests. On the eastern side of the island lies El Yunque tropical rainforest. This area has an average rainfall of 3 meters per year and a highly diverse ecosystem. As well as birds and mammals, the tropical forest is also home to more fragile creatures. Both in the water and on land. Each year, the Caribbean is hit by hurricanes arriving from the Atlantic. Puerto Rico lies right in the path of these huge storms. When hurricanes land, they bring huge amounts of rainfall to the island over very short periods of time. As the water rises, the equivalent of a full year's worth of sediment can be washed into the rivers within the space of a few hours. Rainfall and flooding threaten the forest's tiny inhabitants. These sudden seasonal onslaughts mean even the river's smallest residents have had to look for solutions. The shrimp cope with the rising waters by heading to find shelter or hunkering down. Some shrimp simply avoid the worst impacts of the storm by getting out of the water and walking on land. In fact, very few shrimp die during these events. Many times, they are merely relocated and can even find themselves in the midst of a hurricane-induced smorgasbord surrounded by food. Though they are small, these shrimp eat a huge amount of the plant matter and actually clear the rivers of storm debris. Without these creatures, the streams and waters of Puerto Rico would be completely overwhelmed by organic litter after storms and hurricanes. When a cyclone approaches, fire ants find themselves in a very vulnerable position, faced with rising waters and torrential rain. But they have adapted and come up with a flood drill. Forced to abandon their home, the ant version of Noah's Ark is an incredible feat of survival engineering. The worker ants literally stick together, hanging on to each other by holding tarsi, the insect equivalent of hands. Enough air is trapped on the bodies of the workers around hairs on their legs to prevent them from drowning, and the ants constantly move on the raft, taking turns in various positions. The queen and larvae are protected in the centre, the driest, safest part of this nautical pancake. A fire ant raft can survive for several weeks, drifting with the currents. When the water recedes or they encounter dry land, they swarm to shore and re-establish themselves on new territory. The queen is escorted off the raft and taken to a safe location where the ants will continue the next stage of their lives. The animals of Puerto Rico have found some incredible adaptations in order to survive in their stormy environment. Elsewhere, some species choose to head directly into the danger zone. In North America, Virginia's eastern shore is made up of a series of undeveloped barrier islands. Here, one migratory shorebird stocks up on food before embarking on a momentous journey that has intrigued ornithologists for hundreds of years. Dr. Brian Watts from the Center for Conservation Biology tracks whimbrels and studies their migration.
We had the opportunity to deploy satellite transmitters on birds, and over 10 years we tracked almost 50 birds as they crossed the Atlantic and built up a data set to look at how they interacted with storms.
There are two main populations of whimbrels in North America. The birds look identical and both spend the winter in Brazil. But Dr. Watts discovered that the two groups had found different solutions to the problem of hurricanes.
It turns out that these two populations have different strategies of dealing with the storms. The one, Mackenzie Delta population, basically stays out over cooler water where storms don't form, and so they avoid storms. The Hudson Bay population flies directly across Hurricane Alley, but it does so in a place where there are islands that it can use as ports during a storm. And if they do encounter storms, they'll put down on those islands, wait out the storms, refuel, and then move on to the wintering grounds.
The Mackenzie Delta birds take a massive detour, an epic journey covering 6,000 kilometers non-stop over open water and staying well away from the storm area. The Hudson Bay population takes a shorter route, though it's still several thousand kilometers, heading directly through the danger zone. They set off into the unknown, unable to tell if there are hurricanes approaching. But they have a number of options if they get caught up in storms. If they are confronted with a hurricane, these birds either battle their way against the headwinds or land on one of the many islands in the area. Sometimes they're even rewarded with powerful tailwinds that slingshot them out the other side. By either avoiding storms or risking storm interaction, both populations have adapted to the seasonal dangers, yet their population continues to decline. While he was tracking one particular bird named Goshen, Dr. Watts discovered that the risks were not always weather-related.
Goshen was flying over the West Indies, encountered Hurricane Irene, was put down on Montserrat, and then flew over to Antigua, and was on Antigua for 7 days. And then flew to Guadeloupe and was shot the morning it arrived on Guadeloupe by hunters in a shooting swamp.
Dr. Watts believes that these birds show remarkable resilience in coping with extreme weather conditions, but it remains to be seen if they can survive once they reach dry land. Birds have an amazing ability to adapt to changing conditions, and one species of bird has actually turned a bad situation to its advantage. On the island of New Britain in Papua New Guinea, 2 volcanoes have been erupting on and off since 1994. The local town, Rabaul, is situated directly in the crater. Many of the town's inhabitants have left to avoid the thick ash and aerial bombardment and find somewhere less geologically lively. It certainly doesn't seem like an ideal location for rearing youngsters, but when the humans left, another creature moved in, choosing this apocalyptic landscape as a nursery for its babies. In forested areas, chicken-sized Polynesian megapod birds bury their eggs in deep nests of decaying vegetation. But around the crater, they lay their eggs up to 2 meters deep in volcanic ash. Egg-laying takes place during calm periods between eruptions. Megapod parents don't incubate their eggs like other bird species. Instead, they leave that job to the volcano itself. Sometimes the megapods brave the disaster zone to return and lay a second or even a third egg. The sparse trees provide little protection from the constant rain of volcanic bombs. In some cases, the stress is too much, and the birds abandon their eggs before they have a chance to bury them. As usual in nature, nothing goes to waste. Megapod eggs have the largest yolk of any birds, making up to 50 to 70% of the egg's weight. Deep in the warm ash, the surviving eggs are kept at a constant temperature. Unlike most other bird species, megapod parents never see their offspring and play no part in raising them. When they finally hatch underground, the young chicks must claw their way to the surface. They emerge fully feathered, with eyes open and ready to fly from day one. It seems like a risky venture, but every year thousands of birds come here to lay their eggs and entrust them to the bowels of the earth.